Hello, I'm Joe Smiles from Fat Loss S.O.S. Today I'm going to critique a Diary of a CEO episode with Steve Bartlett, another charlatan he's had on his program. This one is episode 243, the scary new research on sugar and how they made you addicted to it. Well, you don't get addicted to food, you don't get addicted to sugar for a start. It's got this woman called the glucose goddess who is anti-glucose, so why she calls herself the glucose goddess. Her name's Jessie Inchauspy. Okay, let's listen to the introduction, shall we?
Yeah, it's important. I thought the subject matter of glucose was boring until I read your book, and then I was like, oh my god!
Jessie Inchauspy, the glucose goddess,
is a biochemist, an author, teaching us the best hacks to eat right
without giving up the foods.
It's all about hacks.
Glucose is your body's favorite source of energy.
True.
Your brain cells are using glucose to think, speak,
True.
move. So when you flood your body with too much glucose too quickly, what happens is what I call a glucose spike. The more spikes you have,
Not
the
true.
faster you die.
More spikes you have, the faster you die.
About
Not
these
true.
10 hacks.
Yeah.
10 hacks.
Eat food in the right order.
Yeah.
Eat food in the right
After you
order.
eat, move. Drink vinegar before you eat.
Yeah.
Drink
You're such a
vinegar
weirdo.
before you eat. She is a weirdo.
Learn the glucose hacks and then just eat everything you love. Like, that's the thing you have to understand.
Why do you care about this stuff?
Well,
Here we
I
go.
went
She's going to start
through my
crying.
own sort of health journey.
Health
It was
journey.
Awful. And I was like, I need to figure out
Why
how
is
to
it
fix
that all
myself. Like, I need
these
to understand what's
charlatans
going on, because otherwise I just
have
don't wanna
mental
live
health
anymore.
issues?
It was really to that point. I was like, either I figure out how to fix this, or this is just too painful of an existence.
Now she's crying. Why do they always cry when they go on his program?
Before this episode starts, I have a small
Okay.
favour to ask from you.
What a load of nonsense. I'm gonna critique this massive misinformation, and I'm gonna do it on a presentation, and let's get started and see how we go. Okay, so the scary new research on sugar and how they made you addicted to it. This is the episode 243 of the Diary of a CEO with Steve Bartlett. Okay, let's critique the misinformation. Can your blood glucose levels spike higher than the normal glucose range if you don't have diabetes? Yes, your blood glucose levels can spike higher than the normal range if you don't have diabetes for various reasons, but not the reasons that you would expect. Stress, severe infection, certain medications, sometimes from a high carb meal. However, the spike is usually temporary and returns to normal within a few hours and causes no issues whatsoever to normal people without type 2 diabetes. Fasting blood glucose results. So just to summarize here, low blood glucose levels is less than 3.9 millimoles per litre. For the Americans it's 70 milligrams per deciliter. Normal blood glucose is between 4 and 7 millimoles per litre. For Americans it's 70 to 99 milligrams per deciliter. And that's fasted. Good to get the blood test result fasted. But under 8.5 to 9, 2 hours after eating would be normal. So pre-diabetes, the fasted glucose would be 5.5 to 6.9 millimoles. So as you can see, that's higher than the normal 4 to 7. And in American terms, that's 99 to 125 milligrams per deciliter. And the 2-hour glucose levels would be between 7.8 and 11 for the UK and 140 to 199 milligrams per deciliter for the United States. Diabetes is basically higher than 7 millimoles per litre or higher than 126 milligrams per deciliter. Hemoglobin A1C measures long-term blood sugar averages over 2 to 3 months. So this is an important blood test to have. And anything above 6.5% is considered diagnosis of diabetes. Okay, hyperglycemia, that's when you've got high blood sugar. Now this affects people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes, as well as sometimes women who have gestational diabetes during pregnancy. It occurs in people who occasionally affects people who don't have diabetes, but only because they're seriously ill, such as they've recently had a stroke or a heart attack, or they've got severe infection. A normal person wouldn't normally have high blood glucose levels, and hyperglycemia shouldn't be confused with hypoglycemia, which is when a person's blood glucose levels drops too low. So is hyperglycemia serious? Well, it can be. Diabetes treatment is to keep blood sugar levels in the normal range, which, as we know, is between 4 and 7. But if you have diabetes, no matter how careful you are, you're likely to experience hyperglycemia at some point. It's important to recognize and treat hyperglycemia because it can lead to serious health problems if left untreated. Occasional mild episodes are no cause for concern, and they can be treated quite easily and they return to normal levels on their own. However, in diabetics, this doesn't happen, and it can be potentially dangerous if blood sugar levels become very high for long periods of time. Very high blood sugar levels can cause life-threatening complications such as diabetic ketoacidosis. This is when your body starts breaking down fat as an energy source, which can lead to a diabetic coma. And this tends to affect people with type 1 diabetes, which tends to be genetic, and you're normally born with type 1 diabetes. Does hyperglycemia only happen in diabetics? No, it does rarely occur in non-diabetics as well. For example, you might have a temporary spike outside the 4 to 7 millimoles per litre or 70 to 99 milligrams per deciliter fasted, but sometimes it occurs during a high carb meal, and it is perfectly normal. During times of stress, illness or severe infection, you can get hyperglycemia. Some side effects of medications and some underlying medical conditions such as Cushing's syndrome and pancreatitis. Temporary spikes aren't a problem in healthy non-diabetic people. They are very temporary, they cause no problem whatsoever. However, it's worth noticing that hyperglycemia is a hallmark of diabetes, and repeated measures of fasted plasma glucose levels via blood tests that are outside of the normal range means that you have type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes. So if you're experiencing persistent severe hypoglycemic symptoms, you speak to your doctor to determine the underlying cause. Is it dangerous that your blood glucose levels can rise temporarily higher than the normal glucose range in adults, or does it cause any medical conditions? Also, how much can your blood glucose levels spike without having diabetes? So this glucose goddess, she says that your blood glucose level spikes all the time. So temporary spikes above normal range in non-diabetics aren't dangerous, they rarely occur, they don't cause any medical conditions. If blood glucose levels do slightly spike outside of the normal range, slightly outside of the normal range, they return within 2 to 3 hours. However, blood glucose levels over long periods of time means you're developing insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, and eventually you'll develop type 2 diabetes. However, this means that you either, if your blood glucose levels are spiking regularly, it means you have pre-diabetes, diabetes, or you're most certainly obese, because one of the major factors for getting type 2 diabetes is obesity. Is there any scientific research that suggests that spikes in blood glucose levels causes mental health disorders? Well, some research suggests that spiking blood glucose levels develops or exacerbates mental health disorders, although the evidence is inconclusive, but she seems to think that it's completely conclusive, and it does. But it tends to be only in patients seen with type 2 diabetes. It's called diabetes distress, and it's because people with diabetes tend to get stressed. They tend to get stressed about pricking their fingers, measuring they're notorious for not measuring their blood glucose levels. They tend to get depressed and they get anxiety. For example, hyperglycemia may cause people to worry, and it's called the diabetes distress. Around 33 to 50% of diabetics will experience diabetes distress at some point, but it mainly applies to type 1 diabetics because they tend to be born with it, and it's a mentally fatiguing and illness to deal with because kids don't fully understand what's going on, and they have to constantly keep checking their blood glucose levels, and they have to do it daily, multiple times, and it can be quite mentally wearing. So diabetics are twice as likely to experience depression as non-diabetics, and that's with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. However, there's conflicting evidence on the potential roles of the factors that account for the depression, but mood normally plays a role in uncontrolled glucose levels, and illness can cause depression just simply by knowing that you're ill or being ill. The main causes of type 2 diabetes, there are 6 genetic, your inherited genetics. Around 60 genetic regions have been identified, but only 10 to 15% of type 2 diabetes is genetics. Lifestyle factors, so unhealthy lifestyle factors, so physical inactivity, poor diet, but mainly obesity, and they've classed this as diabesity. So diabetes and obesity, they put the two words together, researchers, and they've come up with diabesity, and that increases your risk. Obesity plus inactivity equals about 90 to 95% cases of type 2 diabetes. Your lipid profile. Is there any evidence to suggest that glucose causes acne? The glucose goddess seems to think that there is, but there's limited scientific evidence that glucose itself causes acne. There's a number of reasons for this. Some studies have investigated the relationship between diet and acne and high glycemic index foods. However, when we eat high glycemic index foods, any type of foods, we mix fats and proteins. So the glycemic index is really looked at as a glycemic load. So the glycemic score of food is based on a scale of 0 to 100, with pure glucose being at the highest, being a value of 100. And when we eat, glycemic index goes out the window because mixing foods changes the glycemic index of the food, which then is referred to as glycemic load. So protein and fat can change the glycemic index of the meal. Different types of carbs can change the glycemic index of a meal. Therefore, there's very little evidence that the concept of glycemic index has any effect on food, eating different types of food, and effects on the body and acne. And the highest glycemic index foods are rapidly digested and absorbed, leading to increased blood sugar levels, but normally still within the range of 4 to 7. And these includes white bread, bagels, refined grains, sugary drinks, fruit juice, cookies, sweets, white rice, pasta, potatoes. The Japanese live on white rice, and they have some of the lowest obesity and type diabetes population in the world. So there's no link really between high glycemic index foods and diabetes. Is there any evidence to suggest that glucose causes acne? Part 2. The glycemic index concept has been debunked. The reason being is that the overall meal composition and the amount of food consumed all affects the glycemic response. So for example, it's important to note that high glycemic index foods can be unhealthy, and some low glycemic index foods can be high in calories and not nutrient dense and also unhealthy. So a balanced mixture of high and low glycemic index foods is best. So according to the glycemic index database, dark chocolate is 70 to 85% cocoa solids and is around 23 to 26 on the glycemic index, which is far from 100 being the highest glycemic index level, which would be pure glucose or white bread. So dark chocolate is very low on the glycemic index. White chocolate is slightly higher at 43 to 49. Most people think chocolate would be right at the top, but it's not, because it has fat in, so it changes the glycemic load or the glycemic index of food. It's worth noting that glycemic index is not the only factor to consider when you're evaluating the healthfulness of a food. Other factors such as nutrient content, fiber content is very important, calorie density and nutrient density is important. So it's a myth that foods like chocolate and junk food can cause acne because they're lower on the glycemic index and they have a mixture of glucose and fats in the food. Does glucose cause inflammation in the body? Well, she says that it does, but yes and no. Glucose can cause inflammation in the body when your blood glucose levels are consistently high over a prolonged period of time, i.e. treated type 2 diabetes. Otherwise, under no circumstances does glucose cause any inflammation whatsoever. When blood glucose levels are elevated for long periods of time, excess glucose can react with proteins in the body, and this is called glycation, and this leads to a formation of what's called AGEs, which is advanced glycation end products. Now, advanced glycation end products are known to promote inflammation in the body by activating the immune system to increase pro-inflammatory markers, and inflammation can cause type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease and some forms of cancer. So pro-inflammatory cytokines and other molecules that promote inflammation, and the activation of nuclear factor kappa B pathway also increases inflammation. But overall, it's important to note that glucose itself is not inflammatory. Only high levels of glucose in your blood over extended periods of time, or other parts of the body over extended periods of time, such as having unmedicated type 2 diabetes, contributes to chronic inflammation in the body. Is there any evidence that the number of glucose spikes ages the skin? Not really. She seems to think, the glucose goddess seems to think that it doesn't. There's limited evidence. Alright, what's the fastest way to age the skin? Well, it's certainly not through eating carbs or sugar. The fastest way to age your skin is, I've come up with 5. The first one, very obvious, exposure to sunlight. UV rays in sunlight can damage your collagen and elastin fibers in the skin, leading to wrinkles and age spots and even skin cancer. Smoking causes premature skin aging because it restricts blood flow and depletes the skin's oxygen supply, leading to wrinkles. Poor diets, high in processed foods and unhealthy fats contribute to skin aging by promoting inflammation and oxidative stress. Chronic stress, in everyday stress like work or in your lifestyle, can contribute to premature skin aging by increasing inflammation and reducing collagen production. And environmental pollutants, so exposure to pollutants in the air such as car exhausts, living next to motorways or dual carriageways, industrial chemicals, this can damage the skin and cause premature aging. To help your skin from premature aging, it's important to practice some healthy habits such as wear sunscreen anytime the sun is out and you're out in the sun for a while, and wear very high 50 plus sun level sunscreen. Eat a balanced diet, don't smoke, manage your stress, and minimize your exposure to environmental pollutants. Also, skincare products that contain antioxidants and anti-aging ingredients help to support healthy skin and minimize signs of aging. But under no circumstances has research shown that eating glucose ages your skin like lying in the sun does. It just doesn't age your skin. Okay, is there any evidence that glucose spikes cause infertility? She says that they do. There is some evidence that glucose spikes can contribute infertility, but it's normally with women with polycystic ovary syndrome. That's a condition characterized by hormonal imbalances where you have ovarian cysts as well sometimes, and other symptoms such as irregular periods and acne. Women with polycystic ovary syndrome often have insulin resistance, so the body's lack of ability to produce insulin or use insulin in the way that it should do and connect to the receptors, insulin receptors, to be used to transport glucose around the body. Their cells are less responsive, insulin cells are less responsive, and they have higher levels of insulin in their blood glucose levels than normal people. So this can stimulate the ovaries to produce higher levels of androgens, which are normally found in men, androgen receptors, or it can produce high levels of this male hormone. This hormone imbalance can interfere with ovulation and lead to difficulty conceiving. So there's some evidence that glucose spikes being when you have pre-diabetes or diabetes, may contribute to infertility in polycystic ovary syndrome, but more research is needed to fully understand this connection and relationship. It's important to know that infertility is a complex condition and it's influenced by many factors, including genetics, lifestyle factors, environmental exposures, and not necessarily eating glucose. Okay, what are the best ways to treat polycystic ovary syndrome? Okay, so the range of symptoms are irregular periods, cysts on the ovaries, excess of androgen production, which are male hormone. To treat polycystic ovary syndrome, you need a combination of lifestyle changes, some medication, and sometimes, but rarely, surgery. The best ways to treat it, I've listed 4 examples here. Lifestyle changes, so losing fat is very important, eating a healthy diet, regularly exercising, especially strength training. This improves insulin sensitivity. This will regulate hormone levels. Some medications like birth control pills, metformin, which is used for type 2 diabetes, anti-androgen medications, and the birth pill can help regulate menstrual cycles and reduce excess androgen production. Metformin can help improve insulin sensitivity. Anti-androgen medications can help to reduce acne and excess hair growth, which is found more in men but can happen in women with polycystic ovary syndrome. Surgery in rare cases, but that would be to remove cysts on the ovaries that are causing pain or damage. And fertility treatments if a woman is trying to get pregnant or has irregular ovulation. In healthy, non-obese individuals without type 2 diabetes, is there any need to monitor your blood glucose levels? No. This is becoming a new fad, and you might have seen it on advertised on things like the Zoe diet, where they stick these big white plastic circles on your arm. You just do not need to do this. Healthy, non-obese, or even sometimes obese people without diabetes do not need to monitor their glucose levels 24 hours a day. It's totally unnecessary. Constantly monitoring your blood glucose levels when you don't have diabetes is a complete scam.